Cool. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining this Xoogler conversation. I'm so glad we're having it with Turing, one of our long-standing Xoogler hosts, but also decided to take up the opportunity to help us at a board level because Xoogler is under a non-for-profit. She joined Turing a few months ago, and when there was an opportunity for us to potentially collaborate, she put us in touch with her colleagues. So glad that Xooglers who are now at companies like Turing forward these opportunities where we know so many Xooglers are now exploring different work opportunities that we can have a casual Q&A where at least one, you learn more about what the industry is doing. Two, if you want to follow up opportunities at Turing, you're very welcome to. But so glad that we're able to have this conversation today. So Tayu, I'm not going to get you to introduce yourself, but want to make sure that you knew that the Xoogler community has now grown to over 35,000 globally. We do over 300 events a year. And we have different subsector communities, whether people are interested in AI, people who are engineers, people who are founders. Actually just got off a call with founders from all over the world who are coming together. And we're so glad that folks like you are able to introduce your company, the opportunities on full-time fractional basis, and just be an open QA, as you said. I guess the first thing to do is how did you end up in Turing? Tell us more about what is Turing for those who don't know what is Turing. Thank you.
Awesome. Let me give a quick introduction about myself, and that will help you to walk me through into Turing and what got me into Turing and excited about our journey in Turing. So for folks who don't I know a lot of you are new for me, new faces. So my name is Satayo. I am in the Bay Area, and in my home we have my wife and my kid who's 8-year-old, and so we're all been living in the Bay Area for the last 15+ years. Originally, I'm born and brought up in India. I did my undergrad in India, and I came over to the US back in 2007 to do my master's in computer science and from USC. And I finished my master's. Then I started working for Microsoft early in 2008 and worked in Microsoft in Seattle for 3 years on the SharePoint applications. And following it, then I decided I want to move over to the Bay Area, being the Silicon Valley hub. And my wife was here too at that time. So then I started working for a startup called as Riverbed, which was in the networking space. The goal for me for moving from Microsoft, from the applications to the networking space was I always wanted to learn the full stack. I was hey, I want to know every layer of the stack in software engineering, from UI coding to networks and packets and everything what goes over the internet and the routers. And so as part of it, I started reading a lot of RFCs, trying to write protocols, etc., which were very low level, and started working on those. And then in 2014, Microsoft reached out back to me and said hey, do you want to come back? Now we have a new leadership, under Satya. We are planning to have new products being launched. And so this is a great time if you want to join us back. And so I decided to come back to Microsoft in 2014 in the Bay Area. And then I started leading teams for Mac initially. And then Microsoft made some acquisitions with iOS and Android for Outlook. And so I started leading teams for Mac, iOS, Android across the base, and then started working on all of these applications. And one of the vision for Satya was how do you build one Outlook? Because we had lots of versions of Outlook. And then I was leading a lot of efforts for how do you consolidate all the Outlooks together and how can you have features being launched quickly. And I did this for close to 8.5, 9 years in my journey in the second stint in Microsoft. And in 22, when after the pandemic, people were all working remotely from different places. And I, as a leader, had also gone through those challenges, as through the pandemic, because nobody had known about the pandemic. So everybody was trying to cope up with it. And we definitely, for me, I saw a world where there was a productivity boost with people all around the world. And so in 22, when Turing reached out to me first, Turing was a company which started off a few years prior to it, in 2018. But Turing was at that stage in 22, more focused on how do you start having talent from all over the world to be working together for companies in the Valley, etc., and for other companies around also. So we were trying to hire talent and making sure how we can have these developers and everybody to be vetted for different signals, because we wanted automated vetting signals, etc., for different languages, etc., also, so that we can scale up all our production line. And so we started having all of these, and then having the personal touch also, because interviews are not just about technical skills. There is the personal element which you have, where you want to be connected and associated with the company. So we were trying to figure out how do you build AI with how you use AI to have this vetting module. And that's what my journey in Turing started off in 22 early. And I started building a lot of these modules for how we could be hiring talent from all over the world and how we could be vetting them. And in 22, then OpenAI reached out to us also. And as part of our journey through OpenAI, we started getting into, this is prior to GPT-3 launching, and then we started getting into the data space of LLMs. And then we started like working with OpenAI, and then following it, we started collaborating with like Anthropic, Google, Meta, and a lot of other companies. And so as part of that journey, I have been in Turing, and over the last 2 years, being instrumental with working closely with the researchers in lots of companies, and in terms of like training models. And I feel that's something that really I'm passionate about in terms of like how the AI space is moving and how the models have been like improving every year over year and every month over month. And so that's the exciting part for me. And that's what gets me going in Turing right now.
Awesome. In terms of the team that you're running, and I know there's full-time people, but also fractional. Can you share more about the team?
Yes. So in terms of like the way like Turing is structured as an organization is we have people who are like full-time employees in Turing. Our workforce is roughly closer to like 800 or so that we have like employees which are full-time in Turing. But we have like a large community of like developers. As I mentioned, like our platform today, the Turing platform has 4 million plus developers which are available on the platform, who have like signed up on Turing, who have taken tests on Turing, etc. And through them, that's how the reach for training LLMs has helped us, because we get a huge diversity across the board where people with different talent, different locales, multilinguality, multimodality, all of these domains that you speak about, we've been able to tap and help like models to be improving and people being able to do something that they are passionate about. That's the most important thing, because it's not just about improving models, but sometimes people love photography and they're like, hey, I love that as a hobby. And I want to be like taking those, while if I can be paid along for it, why not? Like, and I'll do that for you guys. And that's what like Turing sometimes helps folks to be full-time, like in terms of like working for Turing, because many people look for Turing as a full-time opportunity where they want to just grow their career. And we'll have these contractors working on our team right now, and we'll have daily stand-ups with them. We'll like be growing their career. We'll have career progressions, like performance reviews, everything for them that we have been doing. So it's not just like oh, you're an annotator or contractor, and then we don't just treat you as a contractor. It's never the case. And then in addition to it, we have also like part-time folks who are like working for us. And then through these part-time folks, like some of them might be working like minimum 10 hours to then like 10 hours to 40 hours, like people are working. Sometimes they're working, some people are working extra hours too. But that's the range, like for most people, like minimum people will be working for at least 10 hours for us.
Cool. Sounds like it's 10 hours. I know some people had questions regarding the hours and onwards. And is it certain times of day? Can they just say, I just want to focus on this one day and the rest of the week I can work on other opportunities? Or how would you want folks to think about their time?
Yeah. So that's a great question. Like, so there are we have different types of projects, like which we are like working on, and like when we are working with different researchers. So one of the projects which we commonly see as a pattern is a lot of our projects are not just a few days or something, like many of them like run into months, like etc. also. So we are definitely looking for people who can contribute few hours, like at least for a few days, rather than just being like a day and then like being off. Because many times when you have to get feedback to people or something, or you even want to learn, people want to learn, if you're just available for a day and then not available for the whole week or so, it's hard to communicate and like know for people, right? And as part of being remote, one of the ways that has worked well for us is, irrespective of any time zone people are working, we all try to overlap a few hours every day with each other. So that at least helps us to have this face-to-face communication. So my own engineering teams are spread across in like 75 plus countries. And every day I'll try to make sure that I can have some overlapping time, like with each one of them, that I can talk to them, I can answer their questions. It doesn't matter if somebody's an IC leader anywhere in the organization, but I want to be like knowing what's happening on the ground, like working through, looking at their problems also, and working through them. And that collaboration, I feel that's what makes work exciting for everybody every day. And so we are flexible in terms of like the total number of hours that people work in, but typically we look for if people can give like a few days, few overlapping hours, like or so, at least, so that early in the project, that's most important when you're understanding the guidelines, you're understanding the rules for the project, etc. And folks might have questions also, right? Like in terms of like understanding, what am I supposed to do? Am I doing it correctly or not? But once you become like self-sufficient, we are totally fine. Like if the overlap reduces from there on. Yeah.
Awesome. In terms of time frame, sometimes people are between things or taking some time off. do you request they make themselves available for a certain number of weeks or months, or what's the minimum that people should think about?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, like a lot of our contractors are like working for us like through multiple years now. So it's like, it's not like a short-term stint where they're like, hey, we love the work that we are doing. Across time, we have them like work on different projects also, because we don't want people to be just stuck on one project and then feel like over a period of time that there's a fatigue happening, like in terms of it. And then when fatigue starts happening, then quality starts suffering, people are not enjoying the work. So we do check in with folks and like ask them always, if there are certain other projects, we let them know that these are certain new projects and here are the opportunities. If you want us to like have you switch over into something, we are more than happy. And many times people will be playing different roles, right? Like, because sometimes people are working as an IC in certain projects, but as soon as they have like worked their way through it and a new project starts, and they'll be like, hey, I'm starting up as a lead, because we're looking at like leads in this project or something who can like be driving the project end to end. And so people will just be jumping over. And that's the career progression that people are having like through the journey, to say, hey, I want to be like working as a lead. Through the leads, you're working up, and many times then you're starting to work closely with the researchers also. So I spend a lot of my time like talking to researchers at OpenAI, like with Anthropic, with Google researchers, like Meta researchers. And so a lot of it like goes in terms of brainstorming for where is the future? Like, where do we want to go? What's it going to be in the next 3 months? And I feel that's the exciting part, like which gets all of everybody on our platform to be like going, because they feel, yes, you're on the cutting edge of figuring out what is it after GPT-5, what's like GPT-6 going to look like? Where is it like going to head? And what's going to be the new features in it? And that's what you're working on every day.
Awesome, thank you. And that was one of the questions, how are projects scoped, and can you actually pick what you're working on? Can you share more about that matching process?
Yeah, so typically in terms of like, we have different projects which are going on, because we are working currently, if you ask us, we are working with almost every foundational model company out there. So like from the NVIDIAs, from hardware, to like all the Googles and like everybody else, like Salesforce and ServiceNow, like in terms of like service companies, like, and like all the product companies that we are working very closely with Microsoft, as well as like all the frontier SOTA model companies also. And we have partnered closely with like all of them in terms of like the OpenAI, Anthropic, and even like all the newer startups which are there in terms of like, say, Reflection AI, and like all of these that we are like working, even Cursor, etc. We have been like working closely in terms of like building. So across our time span, we have a lot of projects which have been like going on always. Each project has certain unique requirements, like in terms of like where they are looking for. Some might be looking for like Java developers, some might be looking for Android developers, like iOS developers, etc., for different models, training cycles. And the way we try to do those is, as people like come in onto the platform, they let us know what areas they are experts at. They go through sometimes like a vetting flow, or like just to know like a basic test to make sure, yes, they are well versed with it. Sometimes people even take courses. We make courses available for learning also, so that people can even go into certain areas that they're not aware of by taking a course and saying, okay, I want to become an expert at this. I've never done this, but I do my day job, but I've never done this and I want to learn this. So we make courses for how to build agents, etc., also for people. And they go through these courses. Once they can finish it, get the certification, then we say like, okay, you're eligible to take on some of these roles. So projects are then available, and we generally let people know about these projects. Like, we are very transparent about some of those. And certain times there are certain projects where we make sure that if you're working on a project X, you're not working on project Y, because there is data security that we take very seriously. So sometimes folks who are working on the OpenAI project might not be working on the Anthropic project or something at the same time. But later stage, you might be like shifting from one project to the other project.
Great. I think folks are also wondering the roadmap, right? You did mention sometimes you become the lead after you're there for a while. Can you perhaps share a little bit more how that works, if folks are thinking of this as a long-term career opportunity, and how it looks like?
Absolutely. So folks like who come over to Turing, they don't look at us like more as just data annotation work. Most folks that come to us like look for us like as research partners and research accelerators for their projects. So the way like many researchers come to us is, sometimes they'll know exactly what they want, and they'll be like, hey, I want X, and we'll help them to get X. But in many other cases, they'll just come up and say, hey, I want to climb up certain benchmark. I want to climb up the HLE benchmark. I want to climb up the GPQA benchmark, or I want to climb up the ADER benchmark, which is for coding, or SWE-bench, etc. And can you tell us like what's the best way to do it? And across the board, because we have worked with so many clients, we know what are the best ways to help them to climb up on these models. So we go through a whole flywheel effect with most of our customers, where we try to do an eval on their models, make sure where their models stand today, then give them a custom strategy for how can they grow from that level and what's the next frontier that they should be unlocking. Because if you give like model data, which is like way, way harder than what they have like ever seen, it's not a learning curve for the model. So you need to like make it like, how can you have like say a grade 5 student, you can't start teaching them PhD at the first day. So it's like, how can you teach them grade 6, grade 8, grade 10, and let's keep going forward from there. And then we'll teach you where to get to the PhD level. So that's the journey that we take customers. And so a lot of our work is progression, like where we work with these research partners, where we have a roadmap with them and where we work on certain projects where they'll say, yes, we are seeing incremental improvements happening every time. And let's keep on going on with this, because the frontier is still we can get better on it. And then there'll be a new project like starting up simultaneously also. And so it's a lot with trust, right? Like end of the day, the researchers have trust with us. We build this trust with them in terms of like the quality of data that we give, like the way we communicate with them, like making sure that we are available for them also. And everybody wants to move fast in the AI space. And so we're making sure that we can help them to accelerate fast across the board.
Thank you. One of the questions that came up as well was talking about how the conversation will go through with the recruiters regarding compensation. Can you share more about whether it's a range, what kind of questions they should be asking, or what they should be expecting if they do get on a call with one of the recruiters from your team?
Absolutely. So folks, like when they come on to the platform, we are generally very transparent. Like, and we work in a transparent manner where we work with like every person individually to like know what's like the range that they are working on. So different projects have different ranges also. And it also depends on the years of experience of person like that they are bringing into the project X, like also, and what role you're playing as an IC, as a lead, like, etc. Typically the ranges will like go from like, say, I would say minimum like $70 to like $200 or something that it could be going. In certain other projects, we even go to like $250 or something, like $250 or so per hour that we might be going. It depends on the project, like in terms of like the scope of the project, the urgency of the project, etc., and also the expertise of the project that the person brings in. And so that happens in the first call where you have like working with our talent acquisition team. And that's when they like work with you and make sure that it's something that works for both sides. And then eventually it's like how many hours, how much like is the commitment, etc. They'll make sure that it's something that is aligned so that there is not a daily back and forth to like make sure. Yeah, if occasionally there are some days where somebody cannot work, we totally understand as long as they can make up for those hours like at some later stage. We are okay with those.
Great, Satayu. Before I stop the recording and make it an open Q&A, let me ask, is there anything else they should know about these opportunities, about Turing, anything else you may like to share?
Absolutely. I can say like, it's like, I think we're in such an exciting phase right now where the models every day keep getting better. And it's a fascinating journey. If you asked me last year or a year and a half before, we were working more on like saying, let's build like code generation. Like if you ask about coding specifically, I would say we were working on code generation problems, which is like, hey, how can you get lead code style questions, interview style questions? How can you start like doing those? Like this year at the start or so, we have gone past that stage where the models are starting to like do really well on those like lead code style questions. Where we have like moved over also is how can we start like having code comprehension, like something like, which is like where models can start understanding code bases, real world code bases much better. How can they start like having the journey of like writing a lot of code within different code bases, understanding the style of that code base, understanding the syntax of it, understanding the formatting of it. And there are so many subtleties. Like as a software engineer, we all know that writing code is just one part of our job, while there is so much other that we are doing in terms of like reviewing code, having design architectures, etc., meetings, understanding how things work in production, etc. So if that part of there is like, how we look at it is how much autonomy can we bring in which aspects of like coding, and so that every person can focus on the more important aspects, like on a day-to-day basis, and certain pieces can go more autonomous. So if you ask about those, I can go deeper into any one of those, like also along the way. But if you talk about coding, I think the goal for us is like, how can you build like more autonomy in coding in terms of like code generation, white coding, etc., where we have our PMs also today just building a new prototype on their own now. Like it's like they won't even talk to engineers and say, I can do it. And now I know what's the template. And so we want to make everybody like an AI first engineer and like make sure that, yeah, it's what you can do here is something that translates back into people's work also, because we feel a lot of the work in the future is going to be where people are going to do evals of like work rather than writing new code. And that is like where we are, because when we are building the next best code review agent, we need every person to be the best code reviewer, like actually on the team, to help a model build those. So that's where, and the more you understand those of how to prompt, how to use the models, I feel we just feel all of us to be more productive in our day-to-day other work also. So that's just one aspect. Multimodality, multilinguality, all of those are just other aspects. So I think I'll just keep it open for the Q&A, but happy to go into any of those.
Sure. So maybe one last question that came up that I want to make sure it gets asked is, you really are on the cutting edge of what's happening right now. What career advice do you have for engineers? Does it need to be a Turing? Does it need to be about what's happening right now? But to prepare themselves for the next 5-10 years for their career, what would you suggest people do?
Yeah, I think overall, there is always like, there are those two camps, like where initially, like at least a couple of years ago, there were a camp of people who would say, the models are not there, they're not going to get better. Like, hey, it's like tripping on like simple questions, like how many R's are there in a strawberry? You can't get it right. So how can you even do more complex work, etc. But over a period of time, I would feel models are going to get better. And the scaling laws, like, etc., have like proved a lot of things. Where we are today is, after all of these early stages, we have like now gotten into a phase where we are creating more verifiable rewards, like where we have like from fine tuning, we have moved to post tuning with reinforcement learning, etc. So every model training today's world is with reinforcement learning that we are trying to be creating. And it's actually important, like in terms of like for any work that we are doing, to know how do you create like verifiable rewards, like etc. For like everything that we are doing, how can we make sure that it can be verified, validated, etc. And the more the models can start doing those, I feel like the whole human race is going to get elevated in terms of like what all work we are going to be doing in the future. Because there is a lot of like day-to-day work, like no engineer loves to like just be, let me set up my GitHub repo, like, or let me do this from the ground up. If you can give a prompt and it can just happen for you magically, and like you can set up like all your Docker containers, you can set up your environments, etc. smoothly, you save like 1 day of like onboarding for a new developer, or like for the first week of onboarding gets compressed down to like a day or something. Like onboarding for us like also becomes so fast because people are able to self-serve themselves by having like our own RAG sources and asking questions against it, where you don't need a human all the time to like just say, where's my buddy and who's going to be like onboarding me, because I don't have an onboarding engineer. But all of the AI tools have just been making people much more productive. I feel we are not far away from all of these stages where you have like a company someday, which is like one-person company, where you can have a person with $1 billion making like revenue from a company, and like being one person in that company and making sure that I have a bunch of agents working, and I have a growth agent, I have a data analyst agent, I have a computer coding agent, and I'm going to have all of these agents work with each other. But I know how to play them well enough, like in the future. And so I feel that's like where the future is going to be heading, where there's going to be a lot more innovation happening in a lot of space. Research is like going to be like expediting pretty fast. We are already seeing that with medical research also, where we are focused with doctors that we have on our platform, where they are like trying to find out like, how do you train the models to start investigating on your own? How do you start doing research on your own also? How do you come up with ideas? And eventually the phase, which if you talk to researchers, they'll tell you is, you want like the models to write research papers on their own. That's the North Star if you ask any researcher, where they can tell you what GPT-8 should look like, that the model is well enough to tell you those things in the future. And that's why nobody can predict where the models are going to be going. But I feel every day there is this learning curve, and we can see this on the ground also that I see, which is the most exciting part, I feel.
Thank you, Tayu. And so I'm going to stop the recording in 2 seconds, but last question is, how should people get in touch with you? Is it on LinkedIn? Is it other ways in case they want to follow up?
I'm more than happy, like on LinkedIn. Yes, you can definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to share my LinkedIn. Like Chris, you are on my LinkedIn, so you can definitely share it out. I'm happy, like you have my email address, like for Turing. I'm more than happy, like if people want to just send out emails to me, I'm happy to have like a conversation with folks also. Yeah.
Cool. For those who are watching this recording later, it was Tayu Mehta on LinkedIn, and we'll respond. Thank you so much. I'm going to pause this so we can have a really deep discussion over Q&A with our live audience. Thank you.